So, welcome to another live stream today from Goodbye Metrics with Emilio Benazza. He's our lawyer in Panama City, and I'm very happy to talk today with him about the new rules of the Panamanian Friendly Nations Visa. It changed, and there are now new rules how to apply. And in this presentation, Emilio prepared a presentation for you. He will just go through all the details, how it works now in a practical way, because in the beginning there was a lot of people ask us, how does it work now? What are the options? Is it maybe still easy? Is it not so easy? And so on and so on. So this is why we decided to make another live stream together. And because Emilio, you helped already a few clients, right, to apply for the Panamanian Friendly Nations visa with the new rules. Is it right?
That's correct, Sergio. We have already submitted a few applications under the new rules. And well, first of all, thank you for the chance to share with you and with the Goodbye Matrix community these new rules, the process, how it works. A few months ago, we met to basically explain the difference between the old and the new rules. Now that these new rules are enforced, we have been able to prove with the authorities what is the correct process, what has to be taken in consideration before coming to Panama, while being here, how many trips will you need? So we know the details as to how this new rule works, and of course I have prepared this short presentation, and I hope that explains you at least enough for you to consider what are the benefits and how should you start preparing.
Yeah, perfect. And if you as a viewer have any questions, you're more than welcome to write us a comment. After the presentation, Emilio can answer these questions. And Emilio, maybe you can just now try to share your screen so we can jump into it directly.
Sure thing. 1 second. And okay. Supposed to be.
Yes,
now.
I'm able to see it now.
Fantastic. So, was mentioned.
You can share. Start.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Cool. Back in August 6th, we had the last day for filing residency application for the Friendly Nations Visa under the old rules. It was a bit hectic for a while. A lot of people wanted to take advantage of the old rules because they were indeed, let's say, more advantageous than the current one. That doesn't mean that these new rules are way too complicated. There are new requirements in place, and we'll see about them in a couple of minutes. But mostly, the main change is that instead of obtaining permanent residency with one application, the applicant will now get a 2-year visa, which can then be converted into a permanent one. So that's the main difference, other than the additional requirements. So let me go step by step as to what has to be considered, and start with who may apply. Basically, there are over 48, 49 countries that may apply for this Friendly Nations residency application. And these are basically the whole EU, Canada, USA, Mexico, Costa Rica, let's say Argentina, Chile, Brazil, South Africa, South Korea, Japan, Singapore, New Zealand, Australia. You can Google it, you can surely find the list. Make sure that it's an updated list, because recently there were a couple of countries taken out of the list and a few one inserted. For example, Peru is now part of the Friendly Nations. So main requirement, of course, be a national of one of these countries, which means you should have a passport of one of these countries. Of course, in order to apply as a main applicant, you have to be of legal age. In Panama, this legal age is achieved at the age of 18 years old. So at least 18 years old. And one main applicant may include dependents, basically the spouse. It has to be the legal spouse. So no living partner. It has to be someone that has a legal marriage license. Children up to the age of 25 years old with certain rules, and parents of whom? Of the main applicant. So if we see the classic family of husband, wife, let's say a couple of children, they can all be included together with the husband, parents, if the husband is the main applicant. If it is the wife, the one that is applying as the main applicant, they will be her parents. So parents of the main applicant. Those are the basics to consider. let's see what are the particulars when it comes to how to qualify. New rules required either an investment on real estate, at least of $200,000, an investment on a CD, a certified deposit, or a fixed term bank account, same amount, $200,000, and these are an employment relationship with a Panamanian company. All of these, as if you saw the first video from last May, I believe, almost 6 months ago, have certain peculiarities, and we'll see each one of them. So, real estate, as I mentioned, the minimum investment is of $200,000, but the purchase may be financed, which means that the applicant may apply for a mortgage, let's say making a down payment of, I don't know, 10, 15, 20% of the property. And if the bank grants you that mortgage, you can still qualify if the value of the property is $200,000 or more. And title of the property may be held personally by the applicant or under, let's say, a legal entity such as a company or a foundation. There are benefits, advantages on each scenario when it comes to cost-effective investments and what sort of additional benefits you can get if you, let's say, buy under a company or a foundation. That's for a separate presentation. So if you decide not to invest in real estate, but you still want to apply for the residency, there's a second option, as mentioned, a certified deposit on a bank account. It has to be a Panamanian bank account or a bank with a license in Panama, to put it this way. And yes, the same minimum investment of $200,000 must be considered. And as mentioned, it has to be at a local bank. Panama has over 150 licensed banks, some of them of capital, Panamanian capital, some of them of foreign capital, so for you to choose. And the certified deposit has to be established for a minimum of 36 months, 3 years. This allows for the applicant to first obtain those 2-year residency permit and then the permanent one. Something else to consider is that equally to real estate, the title of the CD may be held personally by the applicant or by the foundation, by a company or something similar. And there's a third option, and that will be the one for employment relationship with a Panamanian company, basically a Panamanian employer. And these are the details to consider. It's not that complicated to establish. You'll first have to obtain some sort of employer's or work letter where the employer not only will establish the relationship, what is your wage, your salary, and what are, let's say, the obligations you have to do there. The employer will also somehow make themselves responsible, liable for the applicant's stay in Panama. The company must be not only a company in paper, it must have an operation license. And this is some sort of, let's say, commercial activity announcement that a company makes to the government to establish that that company has indeed commercial activities in Panama. This means that it cannot be some sort of a company that is only established in paper, but it has to be a company that has a commercial activity established for Panama City. Something to consider is that this license will trigger taxes. What sort of taxes? Of course, if it is a company that has activities in Panama, there will be income taxes to consider at a national level, but also, let's say, municipal taxes, which are very low, but it's something that has to be considered as well. And something else to consider is that under this option, the applicant must apply also for a work permit. If a foreigner is working for a Panamanian company, he or she must have a work permit. It is something that us as attorneys can prepare for you, whether you work for a company of someone else or whether you establish a company and this whole structure as a sort of self-employment. But in any case, you must have a work permit as well issued. So those are, let's say, the three options that the immigration authorities are now offering. What else shall you consider? When coming from abroad, you should prepare the following. Similar as before, your passport and a second ID. This second ID is not required for immigration, but it will be required for the purpose of setting up a bank account. It is not necessary to have a bank account in Panama with a minimum amount unless you are applying with dependents. If you're a sole applicant, you can do this without a bank account. Nevertheless, we do recommend to establish a private bank account in Panama either way, because in order to purchase real estate in Panama, it will be advantageous to have a bank account in Panama. If you're setting up a fixed term account, the bank will definitely pair these with a regular savings account. And if it is some sort of a work employment situation, having a bank account is also advantageous. However, I have to establish that it's not necessary to have a bank account in order to submit the application. As usual, we will need some sort of background check, some sort of criminal records that were issued at least 6 months prior to the application filing at immigration authorities. And these police records must be apostille. This means stamped by the government that issued it and then validated in Panama. This is some sort of a way to make sure that a foreign document is also valid in Panama. And proof of income tax. This is not required for immigration, similar to the second ID, but it will be required to establish a bank account in the case the client decides to. If the client is applying together with he or her spouse, we will need to prove that linkage, and that will be done by a marriage certificate that should also be not older than 6 months and should also be apostille. And if children are being included in the residency application, the same. We'll need birth certificates. This must be apostille. It doesn't matter if they are recently issued or not, because birth certificates will not change. Finally, let's go into the application process in itself. And this will change depending on the sort of option the applicant choose for. Part of the process, of course, may and must be organized remotely, and we'll see in a couple of minutes how this works. In order to file the application, the client must visit Panama. Applications cannot be filed remotely yet, at least not under this type of residency application. This might change in the future, but as it is right now, the applicant must travel to Panama. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there will be a 2-year residency permit, and later, at the end of the second year, the applicant may apply for a permanent one. And yes, as mentioned, this permanent one may be initiated some 2 to 3 months before the expiration of the 2 years. So we established there are 3 options. Let's see the first one, real estate. We recommend a first visit to choose and start the process. You can read there that it says 60 to 90 days. The client doesn't necessarily have to stay that long in Panama. But since you'll be purchasing real estate, you should organize, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks to at least select the property that you want to buy and sign the initial paperwork, the initial documentation. The whole process for you to obtain title of a property from the day that you selected until the day that you are property owner could take that time, 60 to 90 days. It could be certainly achieved in less time, but consider that the property may have a mortgage. Maybe the client would like to apply for a mortgage themselves. Then the whole process may take a while. The client doesn't need to stay in Panama that long. 2 weeks or 3 weeks will suffice to find the desired property and start the initial paperwork, and we may complete it for you at a later point. A second visit, once you are property owner, will be required to file the application. And these should be done in about a week and a half to 2 weeks, the same as before. And then finally, there's a third visit to collect your 2-year residency permit. This can be done in a shorter period of time. Very well. We have the second option, which is a bank certified deposit. And you'll notice some differences here. First of all, in one first visit, the client may set up the account and file the application, because setting up a certified deposit it's not as lengthy as buying property in Panama. You can go to your selected bank, set up an account, and maybe in a matter of a couple of days, 5 days stop, you have your $200,000 deposited in a certified deposit account. You'll obtain a document that proves it and will be able to file the application. So you'll be saving one trip. That's to put it in a plain sense. And then again, there's a second visit to collect your 2-year permit later on. Finally, there's the third option, and that is the employment relationship one. This is the one that may allow the applicant to start a lot of the steps before, because as mentioned, the applicant must prove they have a labor relationship or an employment relationship with a Panamanian company. This company must have an operational license, and we also have to file for a work permit. Most of these can be done prior to the client's first flight to Panama. Of course, if they rather come to Panama and start everything from scratch, we can do it as well that way, but then that first visit will be longer than 10 to 15 days as we have established before, because we will have to establish a company, process the operational license, and this all adds time. Once the application has been filed is when we file for the work permit. The work permit must be filed and later on approved in order to obtain that 2-year residency permit, which can be collected a few months later in a shorter trip of 3 to 5 days. So those are basically the new conditions to consider when coming to Panama. And I don't know if at the moment you have any additional questions, and I'll be also here.
Okay, Emilio, thank you so much. It was amazing.
Shall I stop sharing the presentation or shall I leave it there? Up to you.
So, Emilio, maybe you can go a little bit to your left, I think, so you are better in the camera. Otherwise, you are now cut in half. So,
Okay.
I have a question for you. Out of your perspective, what do you think is the easiest and the best option at the moment to get the Friendly Nations Visa? What would you recommend to do? Would it be investing? Would it be making the term deposit or the certificate of deposit? Or would it be like the employment contract?
Okay, the employment contract is definitely the less expensive, but it's the one with more documents and more conditions to consider. When you're talking about easiest, I would say the certified deposit. Maybe it's not as appealing as other options. A certified deposit would freeze your money there for a while, and maybe interests are not that interesting as one would want, not that appealing. But in terms of flow of the process, that will be the easiest because, as mentioned, in one single trip, the client may open the certified deposit and submit the application. There are no needs to establish a company or look for a work in an existing company, and that will be the easiest. The most appealing, maybe real estate, because that will be a more appealing, let's say, investment or option. You're not only obtaining your permanent residency, if you do it right, you will make business out of this. And again, the less expensive is the employment one. So that will depend on the client's, let's say.
Okay, so there's not a real, a real answer to that. I mean, what I see at this current time is if I make a bank deposit with $200,000 with all these crazy inflation rates at the moment, I mean, for the next 3 years, maybe it will cost you a lot of money to just maybe put $200,000 on a bank account. I don't know. What are at the moment the interest rates at the Panamanian banks? Do you have any idea about that? Or?
Roughly 4%, 3.54. Maybe the most risky, the riskier banks can go up to 5% for that amount. But again, it's not enough to make it an interesting investment. It is the easiest in terms of process, but maybe the less appealing one, as mentioned. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, at least you get like 3 to 5%. If I compare it with banks in Europe,
how much is the dollar? How much is the inflation in the U.S. right now, for example? How will that affect the value of the dollar?
Oh, I think there was just coming new numbers up, and it's the highest rate since the last 30 years, if I remember it right, and it's like I think over 6%. So very very high numbers at the moment. So I think to holding cash will be maybe not that appealing for the future for the next 3 years. So you should have it definitely, or put that in consideration. And I mean, at least you get 3 to 5%. With European banks, for example, you get no interest rate at all, or maybe even negative. So this is a big problem. At least you get some interest rate. Well, that's good. But with real estate, I mean, how do you see that? I mean, you can purchase real estate everywhere in Panama, right? So you don't have to do it necessarily in Panama City, but I think this is maybe the best option you have, right? As a global hub.
It depends on how sophisticated the investment that the client is planning to do is, because definitely buying, let's say, real estate in Panama City and having that lease or rent will be the easiest if you have a property manager. That's where there's less pain, to put it this way. Of course, if the client wants to get involved, there are many options where to invest in Panama City, not only as location-wise, but also if the client wants to, let's say, buy a plot of land and develop it and make a hostel or something like that, that will take more effort, but definitely should be a more interesting investment if done properly. Again, the easiest is just to put the money down, select a nice apartment with ocean view, and rent it. And forget about that. It should give you better interest than the bank, definitely. And at least it's not just US dollars, it's proper real estate. But yeah, as you mentioned, any place in the country is valid, as long as it is in the client's name or in a company or foundation that the client controls.
Yeah, this is what I also really like, that it's possible with a foundation or with a company you control. I mean, that's very nice, to be honest. And yeah, we made already in our... Sorry? What?
Not funny, initially when these changes were approved back in May, that wasn't considered, that the applicant may hold investment in a foundation or a company. Later on in July, there were new changes and they included that option there. So that was nice, definitely. It's more
that's great
for us attorneys.
Yeah, no, that's great. So we also made a few weeks ago a very interesting interview about real estate in Panama. So if you're interested in that, just look on our YouTube channel or on our webpage, goodbyemetrics.com, to find this video. Very interesting details about real estate investment in Panama. Can be quite interesting. And as you said already, Emilio, you can rent it out. You can have a passive income from that. Maybe you have also a possible inflation hedge. And so I think the real estate option is relatively good. The question I have regarding the employment contract, is it like that it has to be an employment contract with an already established third-party company, or can it be my own new company without any turnover at the moment?
That's a really good question. Given that the requirements established in the law are not that, let's say, complex or complicated when it comes to proving the labor relationship, not even a contract is being asked. Basically, what immigration needs to see is a work letter from an existing company in Panama that has an operation license. Those 3 points. So it could be a new company that is established where the, let's say, board of directors, especially the president and legal representative of this company, signs a work or employment letter on behalf of the applicant, where, as mentioned, it is mentioned that there is a labor relationship, that the applicant is doing this specific job, his salary, and that the employer, the company, makes themselves economically dependent, or liable for the applicant. So this is a letter in letterheads. The company must have an operation license, and this is done in a couple of days as well. But as mentioned, given that this operational license is an announcement to the government authorities that this specific company, XYZ Corp, will now have some sort of commercial activity, this will trigger taxes. You will need an accountant to do things properly. We have a couple we can recommend, of course. But answering your question in a nutshell, it could be a new company. But, there are several things to consider. Of course, as attorneys, we can prepare the whole package for you, so it won't be a headache for you, but for us.
Okay. So on this operational license, is it easy to get, or is it very hard? What is your experience?
It is easy, I will say. It is even done online, but we do have to establish what will be the commercial activity of the company, the specific commercial activity out from a closed list. So we cannot be creative when it comes to this. There's a numerous clauses list, and we have to select one of those. Probably something that is not regulated. There are certain activities that require some sort of license, of course. So unless the client wants to engage in this, we would avoid this. Something as simple as marketing solutions, or I don't know, offices management, something that doesn't require any additional permits will be ideal.
Okay, and the territorial taxation system anyway applies to the company. So if I have clients outside of Panama, I should not pay tax on that, right?
If the service is provided abroad, that will be taxable. But keep in mind again that this company already has commercial activities in Panama. So you will need an accountant to make a difference between the services provided abroad and services that take place in Panama. And there's a fine line between whether the money is coming from abroad, will that suffice or not, or basically what our law established is that what is tax free is the income derived from an activity that took place abroad, basically.
So you cannot render it inside Panama and say it's like a foreign income.
Correct. Unless the company, let's say, provide, let's say, I don't know, e-commerce, or let's say marketing solutions to a company in Singapore, and they do everything online, and it took place in Singapore, and the payment came from abroad, then an accountant can declare that as foreign income, and as such, tax-free.
Okay, sounds good. So in the end, I mean, your lawyer and accountant, they know exactly how to do that, right? So when I hear that, and there was another question regarding that, because there are some people in our community, especially, they don't have a tax return, because you said you need like proof of income, let's say a tax return or something like that, to get a bank account, for example, right? And what I hear now out of that, what you telling me, that this option with the employment contract is not that bad if you're a perpetual traveler and you want to produce papers. Let's say you want to pay tax, at least some tax, right? And you want to have a proof that you paid tax, or that is very good, or can be a good option, that you can just set up your company in Panama, right? You get this operational license, you pay your tax, you pay some income tax, and in the end you have papers you can prove to all government of the world that you at least paid somewhere some taxes, or also for bank account opening or other type of things where you need this type of paper. So I like this option, to be honest.
That would be ideal, Sergio, because basically what this means is that the applicant will prove substance in Panama. Not only will they have a residency, a school, a residency card, but they will have an employment relationship with a Panamanian company. They could even have an income tax return the following year, drafted by an accountant with a tax number and everything else that would prove that the client is indeed being taxed somewhere. And most of our clients, not most, but several of our clients already have this solution. They are filing income tax returns in Panama, whether it is tax-free income or maybe a very low tax. And this, again, provides some sort of substance that will say that the applicant is not just a residency that comes every once in a while, but they have some sort of linkage to Panama.
Yeah, that can be very nice if you consider that into your international strategy. And so, yeah, what is for the people who want to start? This is like a connected question to that. What is if I don't have an income tax return because I'm traveling the last years already as a perpetual traveler or whatever, right? Digital nomad. I'm not really registered anywhere. I don't pay tax anywhere. So, but I want to open our bank account or need proof of income. Are there other papers will be considered or be approved, or only the income tax return?
There are several options. Yes, you mentioned there are a lot of people that don't have an income tax return, and banks already understand that situation in Panama. So what the bank needs to prove is that they know and they understand what is the main source of income of the client. So, and what is the average income for him or her for the past year? So anything that proves that will work. The bank may ask for additional documents, but something as an employment letter from a work relationship they may have abroad, contracts they have with providers, bank balance statements, financial statements. If let's say they have maybe investments in the stock market and they can prove they have some sort of passive income out of that. All of that will prove to the bank what is the main source of income of the client and what was their average income. That's what they really want to know. the income tax return is the simplest of the ways to do this, but yeah, any of these options may work. Again, if we're talking about something else than an income tax return, the bank may ask additional documents, but it's completely doable. Most of our clients, to be honest, maybe 70% of our clients don't have an income tax return, and we have successfully helped them to set up accounts in Panama.
Great. That's good news. And yeah, my last question is what we also received before from the community. What are the mortgage rates if you don't want to if you don't want to pay yourself 100%, let's say, for real estate? Do you have any idea at the moment?
Yeah, to be completely honest, those are not that attractive, but it's a solution. So we could be looking at something between 6 and even 8%, depending on the bank's assessments of the client profile, to put it this way. Keep in mind that if an applicant comes to Panama for the first time, that may be a huge risk for the bank. So they will assess that as such. If the client can provide any sort of official document that establishes their income that is steady, maybe they will provide better terms. But I will say anything between 6 to 8 is to be expected per year.
Okay, and how high should be the down payment?
Again, that will be for the bank to assess. In the best case scenario, if the client, let's say, for a Panamanian citizen, for a permanent resident, possibly between 5 to 10, even 15%. For someone that has less link to Panama, maybe 15 up to 20 or up to 30%. So for someone that has never stepped a foot in Panama, they come for the first time and they want a mortgage, I will say anything between 20 to 30%, and try to provide as much financial background that proves to the bank that they have a steady income, that they won't leave the property hanging in the bank's hands. That's not what they want. They just want to make sure that the client has the ability to pay them back.
Okay. So if you consider to go to Panama to get a mortgage, you should consider, if you just do the minimum requirement of this $200,000 real estate, you should minimum have 60,000, I would say, 60,000 US dollar that you could already put as a down payment, right?
That will be ideal. Yeah, that's 30% of those 200. The good thing is that it's an option. Again,
yes.
Banks will probably find a way to provide more mortgages, but of course they will always cover their risk first. But it's an option, which is good to know. You don't have to have the full amount in order to apply.
Exactly. Okay, Emilio, it was a great talk. It was very amazing to talk to you about all these details and to see how the new Panamanian Friendly Nations Visa is playing out, how it works. And if you as a viewer want to have contact to Emilio directly, it's no problem at all. You can fill out our form on our webpage under goodbyemetrics.com/PA for Panama. And then Emilio and his team, they will just reach out to you after that. Emilio, thank you so much for your time and for this presentation. And if you have any questions regarding to Emilio, just write us a comment or contact Emilio directly, and he will be more than happy to answer this question.
Surely I will. Thank you, Sergio, and regards to the Goodbye Matrix community.
Thank you so much, Emilio. See you soon. Bye.
See you.